Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. Glad to give you all some updates from Washington, D.C. as always. If you want to know when we're doing these updates, these live Q&As, subscribe. You'll know it is when it is that we're doing these. Happy to answer your questions. Hopefully we can get to enough of them today before the bell rings here in the House of Representatives and they call me to go vote. So let's talk about a couple of things going on in Washington this week, some of the changes that are taking place with the new majority. And I'm just going to start by saying this. An easy way to outline the changes that are taking place with the new majority is just look at the title of the hearings, right? So I had a hearing today, the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure, and looking very specifically at supply chain. That's our number one focus on transportation and infrastructure, supply chain, making sure that we can reduce inflation, get people goods and services in a better way. That's what transportation and infrastructure is all about. So let's go over some of the titles. I wrote down some of the titles that were from when the Democrats were in the majority, and what did they title their hearings? So here was one. These were their beginning hearings: preparing for takeoff, examining efforts to address climate change at U.S. airports. Here was a second one: disruption in the skies, the surge in air rage and its effects on workers, airlines, and airports. There's another one: bridging the gap, improving diversity and inclusion in the U.S. aviation workplace, examining the roles of ferries and improving mobility. And the point that I'm making here is there are different priority sets here. You know, when we were in the military, I always said, make the big deal the big deal. The big deal when we're dealing with transportation and infrastructure is supply chain. It's moving things through the air. It's moving things across the water, on trucks, across land, getting people the goods and services that they need and having the infrastructure in place to do that, not the stuff that Nancy Pelosi was putting in place when she labeled things infrastructure and just doing her, her multi-billion-dollar parks down the road from her house and things like that. That is the difference of one direction over another direction. Let's talk about something else that's taking place right now. Another bill that we are working on this week, voting on today, was one specifically, we labeled it what did we call it? We called the Pandemic Was Over Act, right? And why is it important to have a bill that says the pandemic is over here in Washington, D.C.? Because despite the fact that Joe Biden has announced that the pandemic is over, we didn't need him to announce that, but despite the fact that he did that, he's still not making an emphasis of getting government agencies back to work in person, answering your phone calls, being there in the most diligent possible way, doing the work of we the people. You still have massive percentages of the IRS that are still working from home, not back in the office, opening up your letters, of which, by the way, if you're wondering about the IRS and backlogs, there are literally millions of pieces of unopened mail because of what took place. That's not being addressed if people are not there in person. So that's a little bit about what's happening with that. We want to go to one other quick thing, and we're not going to play the video of Joe Biden talking about it. It's good enough that we say, Joe Biden said the pandemic is over. We don't need to play his video. But I sit on the Committee of Foreign Affairs. Dealing with foreign affairs issues is all about dealing with the Department of State, agencies that are working abroad, programs that are working abroad, which is your dollars that are not going into a port here in the United States of America or an airport here in America or a roadway through our community. It's going into something that is in some other country, in some other place. And one of the big things that we deal with are terrorist nations, terrorist entities, and ally nations. U.S. is our biggest ally. You look at what's going on over there, the horrific attacks that have taken place in the last week over Holocaust remembrance, and then you juxtapose that to the fact that there are still programs in place that allow your tax dollars and support to go to the terrorist entities that are attacking one of our greatest allies across the entire globe. This should be startling to everybody out there. We have had a bill, the Hamas International Terrorism and Support Prevention Act is the name that has gone by previously, which very specifically looks at putting sanctions on any entity that is out there materially supporting Hamas in one way or another. And it's a very important piece of legislation to stop the terrorism that is taking place, go after those entities that are sending supplies, sending dollars in those terrorism efforts. So I tried to make it very quick today in terms of some of the updates on what had gone on in Washington this week. There's a number of things that are upcoming going on in Washington. Supply chain related, of course, debt ceiling related, of course. Farm bill is something else that will be coming up soon. So if you have questions on those things, Don't hesitate. As always, like, subscribe, ask your questions. If we don't get to your question because the bell rings and we have to go vote or something like that, we will take note of your questions. We will get you answers to your questions. Write us emails, write us letters, call the office. Do what you need to reach out to us if you have a question, a concern, a place that we can help you. And in that, Jim, let's go to whatever the first question is you have. So, on behalf of another, right? That's like asking for a friend, as you say sometimes. Will you try to have the HR 185 bill passed before the end of February so that, and I can't even pronounce his name well, this is a tennis player, right? Can travel to Florida and play in the Miami tournament from March 19th to April 2nd. So I believe this bill was put forth by a good friend of mine, Thomas Massey. Great guy, one of the most thoughtful individuals, real engineer mind. He went to MIT. But anyways, we have a lot of important conversations about policy. I'm not going to pretend to know all the details of that legislation. It's just not so much on the committee work that I've been dealing with. So I will look at it and we will take note of who you are, and I will try to get you an appropriate answer on that. I don't want to give you an answer to something. I really don't know the details of that bill. But again, as we look at that, I'll try to find you the best possible answer and get you a thoughtful one on that. So Jinwook, I'm sorry, I'm not the best expert on what's going on with those that are in tennis and whether they're going to be able to travel here or not. Well, I'll say something else on. Let me say something else on pandemic and on vaccines, just because we're on the subject. Number one, people still getting kicked out of the military for not getting a vaccine. Major problem. That needs to be righted for people that have been separated from the military, whether they're offering them the opportunity to get back into the military, having not lost their rank. This has affected people's ability to get hired by other federal agencies, depending on the manner in which they were separated from the military, dishonorably discharged, or something else. I've always been a firm believer that as it relates to vaccine, it should be entirely up to the individual. You want to get a vaccine? Get a vaccine. You don't want to get a vaccine? Don't get a vaccine. You want to wear 5 masks? Wear 5 masks. You want to stay in your house? Stay in your house. That should be entirely up to you. You don't get to demand what other people do in terms of that, but certainly up to you what you get to do in your life. So this also goes to the conversation of people coming across the border illegally, right? We don't want anybody coming across the border illegally, and those coming into America legally as well. Again, what should the policy be on vaccines for them or everybody else? Choose what you want to do. But unfortunately, we know that the administration was not applying this in an equal way to Americans versus people coming into America legally. So let's go to another question. Can you talk, Pete? I asked a question. Can you talk about your relationships with other Florida congresspersons and how you work with some of them? So we have a large freshman class of Florida congressmen that came in. I'm going to have some people that I'm going to be mentored to. We have a judge. We have people that have worked in the Florida legislature. We have business persons. We have a lot of new freshmen in there. I sit on committee with the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee with Aaron Bean, for one. He's a new member of Congress. With Dan Webster, who is somebody that is senior to me. Also Democrat Florida representatives on that committee. We all work together to deal with Florida issues on the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure. In fact, I'll take this opportunity to say tomorrow, there is a delegation meeting of all members of Florida talking specifically about Florida Everglades tomorrow. I'm not sure if we were planning on totally live streaming that or not. I believe it's open to the public, that the media will be there. So if we can, we should actually live stream. I'm telling my staff right now, we should actually live stream our caucus, our entire delegation meeting on the Everglades so that people can see how just all the members of Florida work or don't work together. It would be a good thing for people to see if they're interested in that. I'm not going to pretend that we all agree on everything, whether it be policy for the sugar industry or policy on immigration. We don't all agree on everything. There are divides, but we try our best to work for the state of Florida. And, on the whole, I think you have a very good delegation for the state of Florida that makes a very real effort to talk about the issues, even if there is not a unanimous consent on how everybody comes down on the issues. So that would be the compliment that I would give to my colleagues in the Florida delegation. What else can I answer for you all? So, Gene, train bridge closing for 3 weeks without opening. Right. This is frustrating to me. Talked about it last week. We did a live Q&A session. Give you all a couple of the updates on the train bridge. Just number one, It's not okay that our waterway get closed off for 3 weeks straight, or even a week straight. That would be unacceptable as well. I've talked about this train in a number of different ways and closing off our waterway. The train company wants to be able to close off the waterway at any time they want. They don't want a schedule for the train. They don't want you all to know exactly when a train is coming and going. And the point that I made to the Coast Guard and the Corps of Engineers and other entities of this, they want basically free reign to just be able to get their goods exactly where and when they want them. Well, wouldn't every business in our community like to be able to guarantee that, hey, we want green lights the whole time right to our business? And if we don't get green lights all the way to our business, then we're going to sue and we're going to say that it's not fair, and that's not the case. No, that's not the way things work. There are very real economic impacts for marinas, for fueling centers, for just recreation, people that want to utilize their boats, people that need maintenance on their vessels, people that go out there and repair docks or work on docks that need to get from one side of the waterway to another where that train bridge is. And this company can't just close off the waterway to everybody. So a couple of things on the fight real quick. Number one, the U.S. Coast Guard deals with policy relating to schedule change. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers deals with policy on this related to temporary waterway closure. Now, in my opinion, if you're closing off the waterway for 3 weeks straight, or asking to close off the waterway for 3 weeks straight to work on this bridge, then you're closing it off. That deals with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and a waterway closure. You're also affecting the schedule of that, so you are directly having to deal with the Coast Guard. These entities are not dealing with both of those agencies in the right way right now. That has to take place. If our highway was being repaired because it had maintenance issues, they would work entirely at night and then have it back open by morning so that traffic could flow and commerce could resume. That's not something that's being proposed right now, where this all gets done at night, and then in the morning it's opened back up for commercial fishermen and other people to come through, and then it closes again at nighttime. It should be offered in that way. You wouldn't have I-95 or the Florida Turnpike closed down for 3 weeks straight, and no more than that can you have our waterway closed down for 3 weeks straight. I will continue to be in the fight on this, and I'll continue to keep you all updated on what's happening on that front. So what's the next question, Jin? Do you have a plan to combat China on buying American farmland? So this is going to be addressed in a couple of different places upcoming here in Congress. Number one, you're going to see a farm bill forthcoming out of the Agriculture Committee. I know that this is something that will be looked at certainly by the Agriculture Committee and the Farm Bill very specifically. You look beyond that. Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, put in place a new, what we call a select committee. It's not one of the normal committees that always exist. It's a special committee just to look at one issue, like the Intelligence Committee. That would be an example of a select committee. This select committee is entirely focused on China, and it will deal with China buying up farmland. Absolutely. It will be with China's theft of intellectual property. It will be with what's going on with China's expanding military, with what they're doing with their various spying apparatuses and everything else that you could possibly imagine relating to China. It will be dealt with on that. It will also be dealt with on the Foreign Affairs Committee, where I sit looking at oversight, accountability issues as one of the subcommittees, and the China-Asia subcommittee as well. So there are a number of places in the House of Representatives that are directly looking at China and very specifically looking at what's going on with China, farmland, not just farmland. That's one place that China, or when you look at this and you say, how does China really buy something up? Is it the Chinese government that's coming in and planting a Chinese flag on the soil, opening up an embassy, and it's purchased from the treasury of the Chinese government? Doesn't always look exactly like that. We know that the Chinese government is the Chinese Communist Party. They have big business persons that are entirely supported by the Chinese Communist Party. They go out there under the auspices of just conducting international affairs, international business. And really what they're doing is buying something up on behalf of the Chinese government, whether it be a port in the Bahamas or somewhere around the Panama Canal, South Central America, somewhere else. Whether it be buying up farmland, whether it be buying up a corporation or a mine for some rare earth mineral that we need for our defense weapons or our cell phones or something else. They go out there and they don't do it just in the name of the Chinese government. They do it in the name of some just business person, right, that's going out there doing this, but really it is on behalf of the government, and that's quite often the way that's done. So I don't know if y'all hear that bell in the background, but that bell in the background is saying that I have to go to the floor of the House of Representatives and vote. If you want to see us go to the floor of the House of Representatives and vote, this is not a plug for C-SPAN, but you can tune into C-SPAN and you can see on 24-hour coverage what's actually happening on the floor of the House or in our committee hearings, questions that we're asking. Let's see, I'll close this with one last comment. This goes back to the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure. We had a hearing today, as I mentioned already, and the bill that I was talking about there and the questions that I asked on that committee. So I was proposing something in terms of policy and legislation to help with the supply chain, to help get goods to we the people, to you all in a more expeditious fashion, and hopefully in a more affordable fashion. So here's the problem. Here's the solution that I outlined. One of the problems is that, say, goods come into the Port of Palm Beach or the Port of Jacksonville or the Port of Miami or Fort Lauderdale or somewhere else. Those goods, after that, have to get on a truck and go somewhere. So if those goods come out of that port and they get onto a truck, there has to be somebody that is at least 21 years of age or older to drive that truck and go move them around the state, around the country to other places. That's a requirement because of interstate commerce. So that's a federal issue. Now, if you look at varying state laws, if those goods were taken out of, let's say, the Port of Palm Beach, and they were dropped outside of the port at a warehouse 10 miles, let's say 10 miles away from the port, and then somebody else wanted to pick them up and go deliver them to somewhere else, well, they don't have to be 21 years old. They can be 18-year-old or 19 or 20 years old with their CDL and go move those goods from one place to another in that fashion. So why have that divide that exists? And there's a lot of small divides that exist like that create inefficiencies in moving goods from A to B between the federal level, the state level, the local level, and where we can fix those places, those things, we make things more efficient. So it's a little bit about the work that I was doing today for transportation and infrastructure and trying to get goods from A to B. As always, it is an absolute honor to represent you, to represent our home, our community. If you have any issue, there's not an issue that's too large or too small. Like I always tell folks, if you don't like that you had to wait on the phone for more than 2 rings, give our office a call. We'll get the agencies on the phone with you. We'll do everything that we can to help you with federal agencies, help you deal with your issues. Write us, call us, email us, text us, and we will help you out with everything that we can related to these federal agencies. I wish you all the best. You all take care.